José was just a boy when the weight of the world sat on his small shoulders. Growing up on a sprawling dairy farm in the countryside of São Paulo, Brazil, wasn't an easy life. His father, a stern man with roots in the old ways, believed in hard work, not school books. The farm was his life, and he expected it to be José's too. Every morning, long before the sun peaked over the horizon, José would wake up to the smell of damp earth and fresh hay. At only 11 years old, his daily chores were backbreaking. He'd cut stacks of sugarcane from the field, the sharp stalks heavy on his small frame, as he carried them back to the cowshed. The cows needed feeding, the horses needed tending, and all this had to be done before he could even think about heading to school. But school was where José's heart truly lived. He was a bright kid, sharp with numbers, curious about the world, and in love with learning. After the farm chores, he would run the long road to school, eager to soak in whatever his teacher had to offer. He had a gift for reading and a sharp mind for math. But his favorite part of the day was cracking open a new book, a window into worlds far beyond the farm. However, as time went on, his father began to see school as a luxury they could no longer afford. The farm needed more hands, and José was just a pair of hands to help. One morning, as José rushed to finish his chores and leave for school, his father stopped him. "No more school," his father said bluntly, wiping sweat from his brow. "You've got work to do here. This farm is your future." José's heart sank. He had known this day was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. He loved school. He loved learning, and the idea of never going back filled him with dread. At school, his teacher, a kind and observant man, noticed José's sudden change. He no longer smiled when he entered the classroom, and his usual enthusiasm for his studies was gone. "What's wrong, José?" his teacher asked one day after class. José hesitated, but eventually told him about his father's decision. "He says I have to stay and work on the farm. No more school." The teacher wasn't surprised. He had seen it happen before. But something about José's potential made him want to fight for the boy's future. "I'll talk to your father," the teacher said firmly. "You belong in school." A few days later, the teacher paid a visit to José's home. The house was modest, like most farmhouses, and smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The teacher greeted José's father, but the man barely acknowledged him. He didn't believe in strangers meddling in his family's affairs. Least of all, a school teacher. "We need to talk about José," the teacher started. But José's father cut him off. "I know why you're here, but this is my son, and it's none of your business what happens on a farm. And it's none of your business what happens on my farm." The teacher, undeterred, stood firm. "With all due respect, sir, it is my business. José is a brilliant student, and he has a future beyond these fields. He has a mind made for more than farm work, and I believe you're doing him a disservice. By keeping him away from school." José's father set down his coffee mug with a loud clink. His brow furrowed. The lines on his weathered face deepening. A future, he scoffed. His future is here, with his family, with this farm. It's what he's meant for. The teacher backed down. The teacher didn't back down. Maybe, he said calmly. Maybe, he said calmly. But what if he's meant for more? What if this boy, your son, could change the world in ways we can't even imagine? For a moment, the room fell silent. For a moment, the room fell silent. José watched from the doorway, his heart pounding in his chest. He hoped, even if just for a second, that his father might listen, just this once. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. His father stood, towering over the teacher, his face set like stone. The farm needs him. This conversation is over. The teacher sighed, knowing he had pushed as far as he could. I understand, he said quietly. But please, just think about it. Think about what kind of life you want for your son. With that, the teacher left. But his words lingered long after he was gone. For days, José's father didn't mention the visit, and life on the farm continued as it always had. José, though, was different. Every day, he went through the motions, feeding the cows, cutting the sugar cane, but his heart wasn't in it. His dreams of school and learning were slipping away, and the weight of that loss was almost too much to bear. After the teacher's visit, the air in the house felt heavier. José's father, despite the teacher's passionate plea, remained unmoved. He was a man of tradition, stubborn as the soil he worked on, and in his mind, school wasn't going to feed the family or keep the farm running. This is nonsense, his father had said, brushing off the teacher's words like dust from his boots. José doesn't need school to be a man. José doesn't need school to be a good man. He needs work, and the farm needs him. And that was that. José, devastated but not surprised, couldn't do much except continue with his routine. Every morning, before the sun had a chance to warm the fields, he was out there, chopping sugarcane, feeding the animals, and tending to the farm. His father's decision weighed on him like a sack of grain on his back, heavy and inescapable. His dreams of returning to school began to feel distant. His favorite books sat gathering dust. His schoolwork abandoned. He felt trapped, as if the farm had become a cage. But José wasn't one to give up so easily. Late one night, as the house settled into the quiet rhythm of sleep, José lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The words of his teacher echoed in his mind. You have a gift, José. Don't let it go to waste. You have a gift, José. Don't let it go to waste. The next morning, as he dragged his weary body through the usual chores, an idea began to form. If his father wouldn't let him go to school, then maybe, just maybe,